What if the greatest stories ever told weren't just stories? Have you ever seen the impossible become possible? Imagine the sun-drenched streets of ancient Judea, the shores of the Sea of Galilee teeming with life, the sacred steps of the temple in Jerusalem. Here walks a figure unlike any other, Jesus of Nazareth. Crowds gather around him, irresistibly drawn by teachings that resonate with profound truth. Yet it is not just his persuasive words that captivate the hearts and minds of those who listen. He also brings the power of heaven into ordinary life, an extraordinary power that defies the laws of nature and the perceived limits of human experience. It is his actions, turning water into the finest wine at a failing banquet, calming a raging storm with a word, feeding a crowd from almost nothing, that truly declare his purpose. These are not random miracles. They are powerful demonstrations that ignite faith, anchor unshakable hope, and reveal the breathtaking depths of a love that can defy reality itself. Prepare to witness the impossible become possible as we experience together the incredible miracles that marked his path and forever changed the course of human faith. The narrative of these wonders often begins not with thunderous pronouncements, but amidst the simple joys of human life, at a lively wedding feast full of life in the village of Cana in Galilee. Laughter echoed through the courtyards, music swirled in the warm air, and the spirit of celebration was unrestrained. Relatives and friends gathered, honoring the new couple, sharing food and drink in a tradition steeped in hospitality and communal joy. Jesus himself was among the guests, invited along with his mother, Mary, and his fledgling group of disciples. But then, amidst the revelry, a quiet crisis unfolded. The wine, central to the feast's abundance and cheer, had run out. For the host, this was more than an inconvenience. It was a source of deep embarrassment. A party without wine will be filled with awkward silence. It was Mary, observant and perhaps already sensing the unique capabilities of her son, who noticed the depleting stores. Quietly, she approached Jesus, simply stating the problem. They have no more wine. She turned to the servants nearby, giving a deep, expectant instruction. Do whatever he tells you. Nearby stood 6 large stone water jars, the kind used for Jewish ceremonial washing, each capable of holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus then gave his command, simple, yet setting the stage for the extraordinary. Fill the jars with water. The servants obeyed without question, hauling water until each massive jar was filled to the brim. Then came the inexplicable moment, not with grand gestures, but with his silent authority. Jesus instructed them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. The results were amazing. The water, mere moments before drawn from a well, had undergone a complete transformation. As the master of the banquet tasted the liquid, his eyes widened in surprise. He called the bridegroom over, not in complaint, but in puzzled admiration. Everyone brings out the choice wine first, he declared, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now. The party not only continued, but became more lively, filled with the finest wines that no one had ever tasted, refined and rich. While the host remained baffled, the servants who had drawn the water knew. More importantly, his disciples witnessed this turning of water into wine at Cana, the very first of Jesus' public signs, a quiet yet powerful revelation of his glory, planting the seeds of undeniable belief in their hearts. The demonstrations of Jesus' power shifted from the intimacy of a wedding feast to the vastness of the open wilderness. On a remote hillside sloping down to the Sea of Galilee, bathed in the fading light of late afternoon, a huge crowd, numbering 5,000 men, with many women and children among them, followed Jesus out of the towns and villages, captivated for hours by his teachings and healings. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, a pressing, practical need arose, murmuring through the assembly. Hunger. They were isolated. Provisions were non-existent in this lonely place. and the disciples grew anxious. Approaching Jesus, they urged him to send the people away to nearby villages to buy food for themselves before darkness fell completely. It was the logical human solution to an overwhelming logistical problem. But Jesus had a different perspective, one rooted not in human limitation but divine possibility. He challenged his disciples directly. You give them something to eat. The request seemed preposterous. Philip, ever the pragmatist, calculated that even 8 months' wages wouldn't be enough to buy even a small bite for each person. Then Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up, though almost despairingly, pointing out a young boy in the crowd. Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, he said, adding the obvious. But how far can they go in such a crowd? It was only a little food, barely enough to feed a family, let alone a crowd. Yet this meager offering was exactly what Jesus wanted to use. He instructed the disciples to have the people sit down in orderly groups on the green grass. Then, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, Jesus performed a simple yet profoundly significant act. He looked up toward heaven, gave thanks, broke the loaves, and gave them to his disciples to distribute. He did the same with the fish. What happened next defied all comprehension. As the disciples moved through the seated thousands, the food didn't run out. It multiplied. Hands reached out, received bread and fish, and passed it along. The supply seemed inexhaustible, flowing from that initial act of blessing. Everyone ate, not just a token amount, but until they were completely satisfied, their hunger fully appeased. And the demonstration of abundance didn't end there. When it was over, Jesus instructed them to gather the leftover pieces so that nothing would be wasted. Incredibly, the disciples collected 12 baskets full of broken bread and fish, far more than they had started with. On that hillside, necessity met divine sufficiency, proving that in Jesus' hands, even the smallest offering could become an overwhelming feast. After a long day of teaching the crowds that pressed upon him by the shore, Jesus sought passage across the familiar waters of the Sea of Galilee with his disciples. As evening descended, they set out in their sturdy fishing boat. Jesus himself, weary from the day, finding rest on a cushion in the stern, soon falling fast asleep. But the Sea of Galilee, known for its sudden, violent squalls descending from the surrounding hills, lived up to its treacherous reputation. Without warning, a furious storm erupted. The wind howled like a tormented beast, whipping the waves into towering, frothing crests that crashed relentlessly over the sides of the small vessel. Water poured in, threatening to swamp them entirely. These were experienced fishermen, men who knew the lake's moods. Yet this tempest overwhelmed their skills and courage. Panic seized them. The boat pitched violently, seemingly moments from being splintered or capsized. In their terror, while their master slept soundly amidst the chaos, they scrambled to him, shaking him awake with desperate cries. "Teacher," they yelled above the roar of the wind and waves, "don't you care if we drown?" Their fear was palpable. Awakened, Jesus didn't share their panic. He rose, not with alarm, but with a serene, unwavering authority. Standing tall against the gale, facing the raging elements that terrified his companions, he spoke directly to the storm. Not a plea, but a command, sharp and absolute. "Peace, be still." The effect was instantaneous and utterly staggering. The howling wind ceased, as if cut off mid-breath. The churning mountainous waves immediately subsided, the surface of the lake becoming as smooth and placid as glass under a calm sky. A deep silence, broken only by the gentle sound of water lapping against the hull. The disciples, drenched and trembling, were left speechless, not just with relief, but with a new, deeper kind of fear, awe. The terror of the storm was replaced by the overwhelming realization of the power dwelling among them. They looked at one another, their faces pale in the sudden stillness, whispering in hushed, fearful tones, "Who is this?" Even the wind and the waves obey him. In that moment, they glimpsed a sovereignty that ruled not just human hearts, but the very forces of the natural world. The revelation of Jesus' authority over the natural world unfolded again, perhaps even more startlingly, under the cloak of deep night. Jesus had sought solitude for prayer on the mountainside, instructing his disciples to get into their boat and go on ahead of him to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. As darkness enveloped the lake, a strong headwind rose, churning the water into a turbulent froth. The disciples had to strain to row the boat, fighting against the fierce waves. Hours passed in this exhausting struggle, placing them miles from shore, in the midst of the choppy sea, isolated and weary. It was during the fourth watch of the night, when their fatigue and the gloom were deepest, that they saw it. A figure, ghostly and looming against the dark water, was coming straight towards their boat. Not swimming, but walking on the stormy sea as if it were land. Fear and panic gripped the disciples. In the disorienting darkness and growing anxiety, they came to an immediate conclusion. It was a ghost rising from the abyss. They cried out in fear before this supernatural horror. Instantly, a familiar voice cut through their panic and the noise of the wind. "Take courage," the figure called out across the churning water. "It is I. Don't be afraid." It was Jesus. His calm reassurance was given. As he drew near and climbed into the boat with them, another marvel occurred. The wind immediately died down. The tumultuous sea grew calm once more. The disciples were utterly astounded. From witnessing thousands of people being fed just hours before to direct confrontations with the natural world, they were always in awe. The one they follow is not only a great teacher or healer, but also someone who can control the natural world, bringing safety and peace even when drifting on the most terrifying seas. The theatre of Jesus' power shifted again, this time to the bustling ancient streets of Jerusalem itself. Here, amidst the daily flow of pilgrims, merchants, and residents, sat a figure whose reality was defined by perpetual night. A man blind from the very moment of his birth. He had never known the vibrant colours of the marketplace tapestries, the reassuring sight of a loved one's face, or the simple glory of a sunrise over the city walls. His existence is only darkness. Society assumes that such suffering stems from his own sins or those of his parents. He was a fixture of the city, a living symbol of hopelessness in the eyes of many. As Jesus passed by with his disciples, this man became the focus of their attention. Rather than immediately offering pity, Jesus used the encounter to demonstrate a deeper truth about his purpose. Then, in a manner both earthly and startling, Jesus spat on the ground, mixed the saliva with the dust to make mud, and gently applied this paste to the blind man's unseeing eyes. Then he gave him a specific instruction, a test of faith and obedience. "Go," Jesus told him, "and wash in the pool of Siloam." The blind man immediately went to the lake. He felt the cool water, obeyed the command, and washed the mud from his eyes. And then, the miracle. Not a gradual improvement, but an instantaneous flood of overwhelming sensation. Light. Colours burst forth in a dazzling spectrum he could never have conceived. He saw the ripples on the water, the stone structure of the pool, the faces of people nearby staring in astonishment. For the first time, the world rushed into his consciousness through sight. Joy, pure and boundless, erupted within him. He returned, no longer the sightless beggar, but a walking testament to an impossible power. Neighbours and those who knew him struggled to recognize him, questioning if it could truly be the same man. His transformation was absolute, a profound display of Jesus bringing literal and symbolic light into the deepest darkness. Jesus' authority was not confined to the physical realm of storms and sickness. It confronted the unseen chaotic forces of spiritual darkness head-on. Crossing the Sea of Galilee once more, he and his disciples arrived in the region of the Gadarenes, a territory distinctly Gentile, lying outside the familiar bounds of Jewish custom. Almost immediately upon landing, they were confronted by a scene of terrifying desolation. From nearby graves, hollows carved into the hillsides used as burial places, emerged people tormented by unclean spirits. Day and night, their painful cries echoed across the hills. They were completely alienated from human society, the embodiment of chaos and profound suffering. As Jesus stepped ashore, this raw, untamed power of darkness immediately recognized a superior authority. The unclean spirits cried out, prostrating themselves before Jesus in awe. "What do you want from us?" There was no defiance, only a desperate plea. They begged him not to torture them or send them into the abyss, where the demonic forces were imprisoned. Their fear of him is absolute. Nearby, a large herd of pigs, animals considered unclean under Jewish law, was feeding on the hillside. Seeing that they were about to be banished, the souls made a desperate plea. "If you drive us out, send us into the herd of swine." Jesus, with startling simplicity and complete command, granted their request with a single word: "Go." The effect was instantaneous and violent. These spirits escape their human hosts and rush into the pigs. Suddenly possessed, the entire herd, numbering perhaps 2,000, went mad. In a unified, uncontrollable frenzy, they stampeded down the steep bank, plunging headlong into the waters of the lake below, where they were drowned, disappearing beneath the surface. The herdsmen, witnessing this terrifying spectacle, fled in panic, racing to the nearby town and countryside, spread the news of what happened to the demon-possessed people and the pigs. The townspeople poured out to see for themselves. What they found stunned them into fearful silence. Those who had been wild, uncontrollable terrors were now sitting calmly at the feet of Jesus, fully clothed, fully conscious, and at peace again. The sheer power demonstrated, both in the liberation of the tormented and the destruction of the pig herd. Where there had been terrifying chaos, Jesus had brought astonishing peace and liberation, demonstrating his absolute dominion. Not all of Jesus' demonstrations of power involved healing or provision. Some served as stark, living parables, challenging assumptions and demanding reflection. When Jesus saw a fig tree in the distance, lush and full of leaves, it promised abundant fruit. For figs often appear at the same time or even before the leaves are in full bloom. Going there with expectation, he found it fruitless. The lushness was only an appearance. Jesus addressed the tree directly, not in anger, but with a declarative judgment reflecting a deeper principle. "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." The words hung in the air, seemingly directed at an inanimate object. The disciples heard him, perhaps puzzled by this interaction, and they continued on their way. The incident might have seemed minor, easily forgotten amidst the weightier events unfolding. However, the next morning, as they passed the same spot, the disciples stopped short, astonished. Peter, often the first to speak, pointed it out. "Look, teacher! The fig tree is withered." The verdant leaves of yesterday were now brittle and dead. Jesus used their amazement as a teaching moment, linking the event to the power of faith. The withered fig tree becomes a solemn warning of spiritual emptiness, masked by an outward display of piety, and a powerful reminder that a life connected to God is expected to bear real, tangible fruit through faith and action. Perhaps the most staggering display of Jesus' power over the ultimate human enemy, death itself, occurred in the quiet village of Bethany near Jerusalem. Here lived dear friends of Jesus, Mary, Martha, and their brother, Lazarus. Word reached Jesus while he was journeying that Lazarus was gravely ill, yet Jesus didn't immediately rush to his side. A few days later, when Jesus finally arrived in Bethany, the worst happened. Lazarus was dead, and according to custom, had already been laid in a tomb, a cave sealed with a heavy stone, for 4 days. The air in the village hung thick with sorrow. The period of intense mourning was underway, and hope had seemingly expired. Martha, ever practical yet holding onto a thread of faith, met Jesus, expressing her heartbroken belief that if he had been there, her brother would not have died. Jesus offered profound words of comfort and promise about resurrection, yet the human weight of grief was undeniable. Deeply moved by Martha's sorrow, and later by Mary's weeping and the mourning of those with them, Jesus himself wept, a moment of profound empathy and shared humanity. Then, with a resolve that cut through the despair, he asked, "Where have you laid him?" They led him to the tomb. Standing before the sealed cave, Jesus issued a command that seemed both impossible and culturally shocking. "Take away the stone." Martha, horrified at the thought of the decay after 4 days, protested, but Jesus reminded her of his promise. With trembling hands, the stone was rolled aside, revealing the dark door leading to the abode of the dead. Then, gathering himself, Jesus looked upward, praying aloud. Finally, turning toward the tomb, his voice rang out with authority, echoing both divine power and deep personal compassion. "Lazarus, come out." Silence hung heavy for a beat, then the unthinkable happened. From the darkness of the tomb, shuffling, bound in the linen gravecloths that wrapped his body and face, Lazarus emerged, alive, whole, called back from the clutches of death after 4 days. Gasps turned into cries of astonishment and overwhelming joy. It was an undeniable, the ultimate sign, thus far, that not even the finality of death could limit the life-giving power of Jesus Christ. Beyond the public displays of power over nature, sickness, spirits, and even death, there came a moment of intensely private, dazzling revelation, granted only to his innermost circle. Jesus took Peter, James, and John, the same 3 who would later witness his agony in Gethsemane, and led them away from the others, up the slopes of a high, solitary mountain. Perhaps they anticipated a time of quiet prayer or special teaching. What they were about to experience, however, transcended anything they could have imagined. There, on that isolated summit, as Jesus prayed, his very appearance underwent a radical, breathtaking transformation. Suddenly, his face began to shine with an unearthly brilliance, as radiant as the sun itself. His clothes became dazzlingly white, luminous with an otherworldly light. It was as if the veil of his humanity was momentarily drawn back, allowing his intrinsic divine glory to blaze forth. And he was not alone. Appearing alongside him were 2 towering figures from Israel's sacred history. Moses, the great lawgiver who received the commandments on Sinai, and Elijah, the fiery prophet who was taken up to heaven. These pillars of the Hebrew faith stood there, conversing with Jesus, speaking, the narrative suggests, of his impending departure, his exodus through suffering, death, and resurrection, which he was about to accomplish in Jerusalem. The disciples were utterly overcome. Sleepiness forgotten, they were struck with profound awe and fear, witnessing this convergence of heavenly glory and prophetic history. Peter blurted out a suggestion, perhaps to prolong this sacred moment. "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." But as soon as he spoke, a bright cloud covered them, and from within the luminous cloud, a voice resonated, clear and authoritative. "This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." At the sound of this divine affirmation, the disciples fell face down to the ground, paralyzed with terror. When Jesus gently touched them, telling them not to be afraid, they looked up to find only Jesus, his normal appearance restored, standing alone before them. This fleeting, overwhelming glimpse of his true celestial glory left an indelible mark. All the previous wonders, wine from water, bread multiplied, storms stilled, sight restored, demons cast out, even Lazarus called from the tomb, pointed towards this. The final definitive act that would forever alter human history and understanding. Jesus, the miracle worker, the hoped-for Messiah, had been brutally executed, crucified under a darkened sky, pronounced dead. His body was hastily taken down and sealed within a borrowed tomb, a heavy stone rolled against its entrance. For his followers, hope wasn't just diminished, it was utterly extinguished. Grief, fear, and profound disillusionment enveloped them. But then came the dawn of the 3rd day, a day that would break not just over Jerusalem, but over eternity. Driven by devotion and the customs of mourning, Some of the women who had followed him faithfully went to the tomb, carrying spices to properly anoint his body. What they found defied all expectation and logic. The massive stone, requiring several men to move, had been rolled away. Peering inside, they saw not the body of their Lord, but an empty space where he had lain. And inside the tomb, the angels, shining, who delivered the most astonishing news ever uttered. Why do you seek the living among the dead? He is not here. He is risen, just as he said. Confusion wrestled with burgeoning, unbelievable hope. They ran, carrying this world-altering message back to the grieving disciples. Then the impossible begins to be confirmed. Jesus appeared, not as a ghost or a lingering spirit, but tangibly alive. He appeared to Mary Magdalene in the garden, to disciples walking on the road to Emmaus, and later to the main group huddled behind locked doors in fear. He spoke with them, ate with them, and crucially, showed them the undeniable proof. The wounds in his hands, feet, and side. The physical marks of his crucifixion borne on his resurrected body. Fear and despair dissolved, replaced by overwhelming joy and irrefutable certainty. Death had been conquered. The resurrection wasn't just another miracle. It was the ultimate validation of his identity and mission. The cornerstone upon which Christian faith would be built, proclaiming forever that life, love, and divine power are eternally stronger than death. So, the tapestry of these miracles unfolds, not as mere displays of spectacle or random bursts of power, but as profound, deliberate revelations. Through turning water into wine, multiplying loaves and fish, commanding storms, restoring sight, casting out darkness, and even calling life back from the grave, Jesus did more than defy the natural order. Each act was a living lesson etched into time. He demonstrated that the boundaries we perceive, the limitations we accept, are subject to a higher authority, one rooted in infinite love and life-giving power. Even in the face of profound despair, his presence offered a defiant light, a tangible hope that pushed back the darkness. And towering above all these signs, serving as the ultimate guarantee and the bedrock of enduring faith, stands the resurrection. This wasn't just recovery. It was the ultimate triumph, the definitive statement that love conquers hate, light banishes darkness, and life conquers death itself. This victory echoes through the ages, offering enduring hope to all who listen. The light that dawned on that first Easter morning continues to shine. These accounts are just the beginning of exploring the depth and impact of these events. Which of these miracles resonates most deeply with your own journey or understanding? Are there other moments from this extraordinary life that spark your curiosity and that you'd be eager to delve into next? Share your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. We truly want to hear from you. And remember to follow, subscribe to our channel Life of Jesus Christ, so you don't miss out the next chapter as we continue to explore this timeless and transformative saga. There is always more wonder to uncover.